Chair Price, Vice Chair Shriver, distinguished members of the Commission, thank you. Think of a map of the world. Chances are you see the map on the wall of classrooms around America, something that National Geographic calls a classic world map. What's at the center of that map? Europe, not America. That casual Eurocentrism has affected the way we think about the world and even about America. America goes from Alaska in the north to American Samoa in the south, to the U.S. Virgin Islands, to the Marianas. Marianas are 1,600 miles from the coast of China. If we saw a map that had America at the center, all of America, it would show how central the Pacific is to the United States. Since at least the middle of the 19th century, U.S. leaders knew that if a hostile power controlled the center of the Pacific, the U.S. was not safe. This was a key reason the U.S. took the Philippines and Guam after the Spanish-American War. As President McKinley said, quote, "I ordered Dewey to go to Manila and to capture or destroy the Spanish fleet because he had to. Because if defeated, he had no place to refit on that side of the globe, and if the Spanish were victorious, they would likely cross the Pacific and ravage our Oregon and California coasts." From that time, it was clear America's geographical pivot of history was the Pacific. If America had free access, it could trade and prosper. If it was controlled by others, it was at risk. In 1907, President Roosevelt sent the Great White Fleet through the Pacific, landing at new parts of America, Hawaii, American Samoa, the Philippines, and showing the whole world what 16 brand new American battleships looked like. Roosevelt said, quote, "I'd become convinced that for many reasons it was essential that we should have it clearly understood, by our own people especially, but also by other peoples, that the Pacific was as much our home waters as the Atlantic." After World War I, the League of Nations gave Japan control over a vast part of the Central Pacific. Many in the U.S. thought that they had the Pacific covered because they had the Philippines and Guam off the coast of Asia and Hawaii as a fallback. On December 7, 1941, Japan hit Hawaii and soon after took Guam and the Philippines. It cost 100,000 American lives and the devastation of island communities across the region to fight back across the Pacific. After the war, the UN Security Council gave the area of the Central Pacific that had been held by Japan to the United States to administer. The U.S. wanted to thread the needle. It didn't want colonies, and it didn't want anyone else to be able to use the Central Pacific to hit the U.S. In the end, the people of what's now the Northern Marianas voted for a covenant with the U.S., joining it in 1986. What are now Palau, the Federated States of Micronesia, and the Marshall Islands became independent countries, and each voted, the people did, to sign a Compact of Free Association, or COFA, with the U.S. These agreements read, quote, the government of the United States has full authority and responsibility for the security and defense matters relating in and to the COFA states, and that includes strategic denial. The result has been, in the words of the governor of the Commonwealth of Northern Marianas just last year, quote, the U.S. territories of the Northern Marianas, Guam, and American Samoa firmly anchor America's position in the Pacific. Together with the freely associated states, it creates a vast corridor of peace and security that span nearly 3 million square miles and connects to the seas of other allied nations. And that's a problem for China. China wants to be in a position to reshape the world to its own liking. It studied World War II, and it knows how important the Central Pacific is. If it remains outside Beijing's control, there will be limits on its expansion and ambitions, including with Taiwan. China has been targeting Pacific Island region as a whole and the U.S. territories and the COFA states in particular, using methods that General Bronner from the Philippines has described as illegal, coercive, aggressive, and deceptive, which I like better than gray zone, known by its initials as ICAD. There are many examples of this sort of Chinese unrestricted warfare in the Pacific Islands in my written testimony. China's goal is not hidden. In 2008, then commander of U.S. PACOM, Admiral Keating, said a senior Chinese official suggested to him, you take Hawaii East and we'll take Hawaii West. There was no word on what would happen to those Americans living in Guam or the Commonwealth of Northern Mariana Islands. China wants to control the Pacific geographical pivot of history and will destroy communities and families, including Americans in places like Guam, to do it. What to do? Block and build. What this means is blocking China's ICAD activities while building economic and social resilience. You can't do one without the other. While China uses commercial fronts to open up engagement with countries, it actually doesn't want to see independent economic growth in those countries. It wants to create economic dependencies. I think of the BRI as standing for the Bribery and Repression Initiative, because that's essentially what it's exporting along those systems, ways of operating that create dependencies and destroy autonomy. So any attempts at building real prosperity also has to block the expected attacks and sabotage from China. At the same time, blocking alone won't work. The region is hurting economically, and if there's only blocking but no building, social disruptions caused by increasing desperation can open up pathways for China. The U.S. might invest $100 million putting in an airfield in a Pacific Island country, and that's happening across the region. But if you don't go after the strategic corruption and what's going on the ground in terms of that ICAD activity, all you're going to be doing is building an airfield for China. It's like kinetic warfare. To make headway, you have to both attack and defend. If you sit in a bunker and just defend, you'll never get anywhere. Attack without cover and you won't last long. China treats this as war, and the U.S. should take it no less seriously. There are legislative relevant recommendations in my written testimony, and additionally, I would recommend: 1, no sitting U.S. president has ever visited a Pacific Island country. If one does, if President Trump chooses to visit a Pacific Island country, it would, if he went to one of the compact states, it would really show the enduring depth and importance of the relationship. It would be a diplomatic version of a visit by the Great White Fleet. The Department of Interior is responsible for the U.S. territories and COFA states. Due to his position as head of the National Energy Council, Interior Secretary Burgum's on the NSC. Expanding his role to include overseeing and coordinating blocking and building in the Pacific would ensure that it gets the attention it needs, especially the sort of interagency coordination that would be helpful for countering that ICAD activity. Also, it would make sure that the cuts that are happening in the federal government don't inadvertently affect the relationship with the compact states and the U.S. territories. Generations of U.S. leaders understood American prosperity is tied to what we now call a free and open Pacific, Indo-Pacific. That can only be secured by limiting the influence of those who want exclusive control. Over the centuries, that's been the Spanish, the British, the French, the Germans, the Japanese, a little bit of the Soviets, and now it's China. We and the people of the Pacific have been here before. World War II shows us the cost of underestimating the importance of the Central Pacific in the same way that in the 30s there was complacency because of Philippines and Guam. Now there's a focus on the first and second island chain rather than on how to get there. Spending a small amount now, but especially to root out Chinese-linked crime and strategic corruption, Beijing's favorite entry points for influence, can save hundreds of billions and possibly many, many lives later. The question is, will the U.S. decolonize its mental strategic map in time and realize what McKinley, Roosevelt, Pete Ellis, Billy Mitchell, Reagan, and so many others knew? If a hostile power takes the Pacific, they've stuck a dagger into the heart of the American heartland. Thank you.